Hello, my name is Casey Clark, and I will be talking about a critical incident that involved an unconscious 70-year-old man. He was found by paramedics, and he was taken to the ER. And when the healthcare professionals here went to resuscitate this individual, they saw a tattoo on his chest that said, "Do not resuscitate." So the healthcare professionals were very unsure of what to do, what would be ethical in this situation. They were unsure if the tattoo actually meant what this individual's desires were, and reflected that he would not want to be resuscitated in a situation like this. So before making an impulsive decision, the healthcare professionals at the ER contacted the ethical committee, and they also sent out social workers in order to try to find this man's family or identify this individual and maybe find written or recorded proof of his desires, which were ineffective. They did not end up finding any family members or any identification, and so the ethical committee got back to the healthcare professionals, and they advised them to not resuscitate this individual. So that's what they did, and the 70-year-old man ended up passing away over the night. So I will be talking about the 4 principles in relation to this critical incident. The first ethical principle will be autonomy. So in this case, if the individual's tattoo reflected his actual desires, it would be wrong of the healthcare professionals to resuscitate the individual because they would be disrespecting his autonomous choice to not be resuscitated. So in the actual outcome of the case, the individual's autonomy was respected if his desire was to not be resuscitated like his tattoo suggested. Also, beneficence, which is defined as helping the individual. So in this case, that was very low because the individual was not actually helped. Also, non-maleficence can be consulted, and this principle reflects restraining from doing harm to the individuals. Although the healthcare professionals did restrain from doing anything at all in this case to the individual, the end outcome was he was harmed because he did die. And the last ethical principle is justice. There were no factors in this case that really suggested that the individual was being discriminated against due to his social economic status, race, gender, any information like that. So the historical context: the individual did have tests run on him, and he did have a history of diabetes as well as a irregular heartbeat. He did have a high blood alcohol level when he was found unconscious. There's really no other identifying information about the 70-year-old individual. He didn't have any family with him. The place that this whole critical incident took place at was the ER. The main stakeholders are the individual as well as the ER staff and the ER itself as a whole, because its reputation is on the line in this case. Also, people who could be impacted are the family members of the individual, as well as anyone in the future who might have a tattoo that suggests a desire like this and may be unconscious. So the outcomes of this case could affect later cases that are similar to it in the future. Organizational and legal concepts. So the Good Samaritan law can be considered in this case, and that law states that in an emergency situation, the person is able to perform CPR on an individual, so that is allowed by law in an emergency situation. The Hippocratic Oath can be considered, which the doctors take, saying that they will help their patients. And finally, the patient's right to autonomy and self-determination is crucial in this case, and that is protected by medical law. One alternative is that the healthcare professionals decide to perform CPR right when the individual comes in. And a pro of this could mean he has the highest chance of life, lowest chance of disability, and the greatest chance for recovery. Also, the Good Samaritan law and Hippocratic Oath were being abided by, and it shows the dedication of the hospital to saving their patients. Cons could be it could cost the hospital, as well as lead to a lawsuit and lead to grief if the man did not want to be resuscitated, as well as disrespect his autonomy. Another alternative is that healthcare professionals decide to perform CPR after the ethics committee is consulted. And this would have the same pros as the first alternative, except for it doesn't have the greatest chance for recovery because we're waiting a little bit longer. And it would have the same cons as the previous alternative. The third alternative is that the hospital hires more social workers and creates a more extensive search to find family members or written desires of this man's wishes. And a pro of this choice would be there is a greater chance of knowing what the individual wants, and therefore we are respecting his autonomy. Also, his family and him would be respected, and that is crucial, and it shows that the hospital cares about their patients and they're abiding by standards of care. However, there is a con, which is there's more time spent by the hospital, and there's also more money spent by the hospital and hiring more social workers. So my decision in this case is I would go with the third alternative. And that's because I think the patient's autonomy should be the most important factor, and this is really unsure. It's really hard to make an assumption based off a tattoo if that's really what the individual would want in this situation. So the best way to find that out is really by searching and taking a fast approach and hiring more social workers to do more extensive research on finding family members or any written or recorded desires of this man. And I think that will ultimately be worth the extra money it might spend, and it might negate a lawsuit in the future because we're finding out what actually this individual wants. And if that still turns up unsuccessful, I would have therefore agreed with what the healthcare professionals did in this case, and I would not resuscitate the individual because I think in this case it would be disrespecting his autonomy to resuscitate him because the tattoo does say do not resuscitate. So if we can't find any other information, I think what was actually done would be the most ethical approach. Thank you.